My name is Jane Lane. I'm 31 years old. And this is the story of how I lost everything I believed in, then exposed the truth where it hurt most. It started on a rainy April evening, one of those evenings where everything feels calm on the outside but something stirs beneath your skin. I was backstage at the Kensington Civic Hall in Portland, Oregon, managing final details for a charity gala my design firm had sponsored. You would have thought it was the Met Gala the way I was running around, checking floral arrangements, lighting cues, the banner placements. My hair was a mess. My shoes were killing me. But it was my night. I wanted it perfect. Then, as I stood adjusting a crooked placard, a voice behind me said, "You look like you're negotiating world peace in heels." I turned around. That was the first time I saw Noah Whitmore. He wore a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, charcoal slacks, and this half-smirk like he knew he didn't need to try. His gray eyes scanned me like he already knew what I was about. Then he handed me a glass of wine. "You need this more than I do," he said. I laughed. It wasn't even that funny. But something about him disarmed me. That moment cracked open something I hadn't realized was sealed shut. I don't even remember what I said in return, but I remember how it felt, like the room stopped moving for just a second. That was 4 years ago. 4 years of memories, laughter, road trips, lazy Sunday mornings, and whispered dreams about kids and kitchens and growing old. I'd never believed in fairy tales before, but somehow Noah made me think maybe, just maybe, I had been wrong. Noah was the eldest son of Charles and Lorraine Whitmore, a family name that basically ruled the Western real estate scene. They owned luxury housing developments across Oregon, Washington, and Northern California. The Whitmores had money. Legacy. Influence. The kind that shows up in boardroom deals and Senate back channels. But when they welcomed me into their circle, I didn't feel like an outsider. They treated me like a daughter. Or so I thought. Lorraine hugged me like I belonged. Charles asked for my design input on one of his new estates. They joked about when Noah would finally put a ring on it. I cooked lasagna with Lorraine. I watched playoff games with Charles. We hosted game nights and spent holidays together. I thought I had found what I'd been missing my whole life. But I was wrong. On a completely ordinary Friday afternoon, one where I was still thinking about the Hawaii trip Noah and I were planning, he texted to ask if I could swing by his parents' place to pick up some files he forgot. I had a key. I'd been there countless times. It didn't even feel strange. But this time, the silence hit me differently. No music. No humming. No scent of Lorraine's lavender diffuser. I walked through the entryway like usual, heading to the upstairs library where Noah usually worked, and then, something caught my eye. A gold-embossed card sitting on the living room table. I picked it up out of curiosity. It looked like a wedding invitation. I assumed it was for one of their business associates. Until I read the names. Mr. and Mrs. Samuel Beringer request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter, Emily, to Noah Charles Whitmore. December 21st. I read it again. Again. But the words didn't change. It was him. My fiancé. And another woman. In the photo on the card, Noah was smiling, hand in hand with her. She looked like a senator's daughter, which, I'd soon find out, she was. My hand began shaking. I almost dropped the invitation. Then came the sound of heels on stairs. I looked up. Lorraine stood at the top, holding a teacup. "Jane," she said, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. "You weren't supposed to be in the living room today." I held up the invitation like it was a bloody knife. "What is this?" I asked, my voice brittle. "Noah's getting married? To someone else? What about me?" She walked down slowly. Like this wasn't news. Like she'd rehearsed it. "Noah was going to tell you this week," she said calmly. "But the timing is less than ideal now." I've been with him for 4 years, I said, my voice cracking. We lived together. We planned to have children. I thought. You're a good girl, Jane, she interrupted. But that's not enough. I froze. Emily is Senator Barringer's daughter, she continued. Our families have been aligned in politics and business for years. This engagement is a legacy. You were comfort. Nothing more. She took the invitation from my hand, like she didn't want me dirtying it with my confusion. Noah will call you, she said. It's best this ends quietly. We're prepared to support you financially so you can start fresh. I backed away. Her words didn't hurt because they were cruel. They hurt because they were honest. Too calm. Too rehearsed. Too easy for her to say. I left without another word. The October rain soaked me by the time I reached my car. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the dashboard, the steering wheel, anything. I couldn't cry. I couldn't even think. I just sat there, looking at old photos of Noah and me on my phone. Happy. In love. Real? Was any of it real? I called the only person who could understand the ache without asking for context. My sister, Avery. She answered on the first ring. Jane? That was all it took. I broke down. Avery was at my apartment in less than 30 minutes. She didn't knock. She walked in, dropped her coat, and wrapped me in the kind of hug that doesn't ask questions. The kind that says, you're not alone. I still had rain in my hair and mascara in streaks down my cheeks, but she didn't mention it. She just sat me down, handed me a glass of wine, and pushed a box of chocolate cake in front of me like it was medicine. For a while, I couldn't even speak. I just sat in silence, holding the wine like a lifeline, my eyes staring through everything and nothing. When I finally told her every piece, from the invitation to Lorraine's cold words, she listened. No interruptions. No gasps. Just silence and steady focus, like she was filing every word into some mental vault. When I got to the part about being offered financial support to get back on my feet, I could almost feel the temperature in the room shift. Avery leaned back and crossed her arms. So they used you for 4 years. For birthdays. For Christmases. For seasons of you being their polished little accessory, and now they want you gone like a contractor whose contract expired. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I didn't have language for the pit inside my chest. She leaned forward again, her voice low. We're not letting them bury this, Jane. Not like you did something wrong. You were loyal. You were honest. You were used. The next morning, my apartment transformed into something like a war room. Avery called in her circle, her boyfriend Caleb, a cybersecurity expert with sharp glasses and a sharper temper, Naomi, my best friend from college and now a content strategist who knew how to dig into social profiles like an archaeologist, and Ben, a lawyer who owed Avery a favor from a past scandal she helped him dodge. We cleared the dining table and started laying things out, timeline, photos, events. Naomi went through Noah's social media, connecting dots between his posts and Emily's, noting all the times their paths overlapped, conferences, dinners, silent weekends that he'd claimed were business retreats. Caleb pulled metadata from archived emails, found planning files for the wedding going back 6 months. That was the same time Noah and I were still booking Airbnbs for our Hawaiian vacation. I found the mood board I made for that trip. Pastel pinks. Sand yellows. Palm green. I wanted to throw up. Ben sat with a pile of documents and said what none of us had dared say yet. This wasn't just a betrayal. You were a placeholder. He kept you around so no one would suspect the truth. Avery leaned over the table. You were a beard for a business deal. That's what this was. I didn't cry. Not this time. I'd already emptied myself the night before. What remained now was clean, cold clarity. A hunger to speak the truth. Avery nodded toward the wedding invitation Naomi had printed out. December 21st, Longridge Estate in Napa Valley. Big. Fancy. Full of people who matter. She turned to me, a slow fire building behind her eyes. That's the day they plan to crown their lie with diamonds and speeches. Naomi sipped her coffee. Then we crown the truth first. Caleb, sitting cross-legged on the floor, raised a brow. I can access their display system. AV systems for those venues are laughably insecure. If I can get in, we could control the screens during the ceremony. Ben raised a hand. We're not hacking. We're not here to defame anyone. But if everything we show is true, verifiable, and already public, that's not slander. That's exposure. I looked around at these people, my people. None of them owed me this. But they were ready. Not because they wanted revenge. Because they couldn't stand the thought of me walking away with nothing while Noah and his family got to script the ending. Avery stood, grabbing a whiteboard. This is now Operation 21. She drew a map of Longridge Estate from the venue's website. Gates. Security. Camera positions. Staff entrances. Caleb would stay in a van nearby, managing the network breach. Naomi would join the media as an undercover journalist. Avery would stage a distraction at the front gate using a fake guest list error. I would enter in disguise, dressed as part of the catering team with a tray in one hand and a USB in the other. The USB would contain everything: photos of Noah and me, side-by-side timelines, emails, calendar overlaps, quotes from his own mouth, and a final audio file, a conversation he didn't know I'd recorded once, back when I still believed in us. He'd said, I just need to get through this quarter clean. Then everything lines up. And no one gets hurt. No one gets hurt. I listened to that clip over and over, until the lies sounded like white noise. I had been so blind. Over the next 6 weeks, we rehearsed our roles. Like actors in a dark comedy. I memorized my entrance, my line, my exit. I practiced saying the words out loud, I have a reason this wedding should not happen. Each time, I felt my spine straighten just a little more. By the second week of December, we were ready. Every detail was locked. But the night before we left for Napa, I lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling. I didn't fear failure. I didn't fear confrontation. What scared me most was still caring. That some part of me, some foolish, broken part, would still hope he'd explain. That maybe, just maybe, he was being forced. But I remembered Lorraine's voice. Cold. Certain. You're a good girl, Jane. But that's not enough. And suddenly, I didn't want to be good anymore. I wanted to be seen. The morning of December 21st dawned crisp and gray, the kind of winter chill that stings your lungs with every breath. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in a roadside motel outside Napa Valley, tying the white apron over my simple black uniform. A borrowed catering outfit. My disguise. My armor. Avery stood behind me, fixing a loose strand of hair and checking for any trace of nerves in my reflection. You don't have to look fearless, she said softly. You just have to look like you belong. I turned to her. That's all I ever wanted with them, to belong. She rested her hand on my shoulder. Now you belong to yourself. Outside, Caleb sat in the van, parked 2 blocks from Longridge Estate. He'd already tapped into the venue's AV system the night before during a routine software patch window. Everything was set, the network access point was stable, the file transfers were clean, and the USB I'd carry was loaded with what he called evidence with elegance. The plan was brutal in its precision. Naomi was already inside posing as a media liaison. She had forged credentials so flawlessly detailed even the event manager complimented her badge. Ben was on standby back in Portland, ready to release legal files and timeline summaries to media outlets the moment the footage played. Avery, with a clipboard and headset, posed as part of the event staff, buying us critical time at the entry gate. She would fake a scheduling mishap just long enough to confuse security and clear a path for me. At exactly 11:42 a.m., I walked past the rear entrance, my eyes lowered, clutching a tray of white linen napkins like I was just another body on the service team. No one looked at me twice. No one ever looks at the staff. I slipped through the hallway, Naomi's whispered voice in my earpiece guiding me. Main aisles crowded. Stick to the right wall. Bride's in the prep suite now. We're on time. The grand ballroom was a masterpiece of wealth. Chandeliers sparkled above rows of velvet chairs filled with state senators, corporate CEOs, and faces I recognized from Forbes and Fortune. White orchids cascaded from crystal vases. A string quartet played softly beneath the hum of whispered conversations and champagne clinks. And there he was. Noah stood at the altar, dressed in a custom navy tuxedo, his hair slicked back like some Prince Charming straight from a luxury magazine cover. Calm. Confident. Pretending. Lorraine sat in the front row, radiating poise. Charles leaned in to whisper something to Senator Barringer, Rebecca's father, who gave a tight nod in return. The deception was flawless. Until it wasn't. The music shifted. The string quartet began the bridal march. A hush fell over the crowd. Rebecca entered. She looked stunning. Pale ivory lace hugged her frame. A long cathedral veil trailed behind her, catching the light like spun glass. She smiled, graceful, composed, but I saw it. A flicker of doubt. Like a woman who had chosen to believe too many reassurances, just so the dream wouldn't break. She reached the front, took Noah's hand, and turned to the officiant. The words began. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of two hearts. I stood in the far right corner, right behind the AV station, my heart pounding, the USB drive heavy in my apron pocket. Caleb's voice came through, ready on your signal. Should anyone here present know of any reason that this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now. I took a breath and stepped forward. I have a reason. The room fell silent. Heads turned. Faces frowned. Gasps rippled like wind through leaves. I walked toward the center, each step deliberate. I pulled the USB from my pocket and handed it to the AV technician, who blinked in confusion. Caleb's voice clicked through the system, override engaged. Playing now. The screen behind the altar, intended for a live video feed of the couple, blinked black, then burst into motion. A photo appeared. Noah and me. Laughing on the beach in Cannon Beach last February. My arm in his. His head on my shoulder. The next slide, a Valentine's Day dinner menu from our favorite bistro, dated and timestamped, while he'd told Rebecca he was on a corporate retreat. Another photo, me and Noah at his family's cabin, a week before his engagement party was supposedly spontaneously announced. Murmurs exploded through the audience. Someone gasped loudly. Rebecca turned sharply toward Noah, eyes wide. The screen flickered again. This time, a voice clip. Noah's voice. I just need to get through this quarter clean. Then everything lines up. And no one gets hurt. The image paused. I turned toward the crowd, my voice low but firm. My name is Jane Lane. I was with Noah for 4 years. I lived with him. I loved him. And I had no idea he was planning a wedding with someone else while sleeping in my bed. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply told the truth. Naomi stepped forward from the press section. I do too, she said, raising her hand. Caleb flashed the final slide, a side-by-side calendar, with Noah's and Rebecca's engagement events overlapping weekends he spent with me. Rebecca staggered backward, dropping her bouquet. She looked at Noah. You were with her the whole time, she whispered. Noah looked pale. Speechless. He tried to step toward her, hands raised. Rebecca, I can explain. No, she said, voice trembling. You don't get to explain anymore. She reached up, removed her veil, and dropped it on the floor. Then, deliberately, slowly, she slid off her engagement ring and placed it on the altar. This wedding is over. The room erupted into chaos. Phones emerged. Guests stood. People gasped. Lorraine stood up, voice slicing through the noise. This woman is lying. She forged those images. Rebecca turned, eyes sharp. No, she didn't. Because I found a message last month. A name I didn't recognize in your calendar, Noah. Jane. And when I asked, you said it was an old assistant. Her voice cracked. You lied to me too. Senator Barringer stepped forward, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder. Then he turned to Charles Whitmore. We're done, he said, loud enough for every camera to hear. Charles opened his mouth, but said nothing. I took a step back, letting it all unfold. The carefully curated illusion they built was unraveling, threads fraying in real time, before an audience of donors and press. And I walked out the same way I came in. Through the service door. Quiet. Steady. Free. Outside, the winter air hit me like a baptism. Cold, clean, bracing. Avery met me in the parking lot. No words. Just a hug so fierce it knocked the breath out of me. Caleb, still in the van, let out a slow, relieved exhale. It's done, he said through the earpiece. No, I whispered, tears burning my eyes, but this time, they weren't sad. It's just beginning. The video went viral within hours. By sunset, my phone was buzzing nonstop. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't spoken to a single reporter. But someone in that wedding crowd had recorded the moment I stepped forward and said, I have a reason. That 20-second clip, me standing alone, the video playing behind me, Rebecca removing her ring, blew up online. The headline on a local news site read, Woman interrupts $1 million wedding with bombshell revelation, groom had secret fiancé of 4 years. A few hours later, it hit national outlets. They didn't know my name yet. But they would. By the following morning, Naomi had tracked over 1.4 million views on the leaked video. Hashtags started trending, hashtag wedding expose, hashtag double life Noah, and disturbingly, hashtag justice for Jane. Avery and I watched the coverage in silence from my small living room, the same room where I'd collapsed weeks earlier, wine glass in hand, with no idea what was coming. Now the same room echoed with phrases like, billionaire heir exposed at the altar. Political wedding implodes in real time. Is this the ultimate revenge story? It didn't feel like revenge. Not really. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel proud. I felt empty. Like the truth had ripped something from me and left behind this jagged hole I wasn't sure how to fill. Naomi walked in with bagels and coffee and plopped onto the couch beside us. The clip made TMZ, she said with a smirk. Someone tagged it the realest wedding crash in history. Avery turned off the TV. We need to stay ahead of this. It's going to turn into a circus. You should issue a statement, Jane. I don't want to be famous, I said quietly. You're not, she replied. You're the face of something bigger. People are rooting for you because everyone's been lied to. Everyone's trusted someone who didn't deserve it. I sighed. What do I even say? Just the truth, she said. Again. So we wrote it together. Just a short note posted to my social media, alongside a simple black and white photo of me sitting on the beach, wrapped in a sweater, looking out at the water. My name is Jane Lane. I loved someone for 4 years who lied to me. I discovered he was engaged to someone else only weeks before their wedding. I confronted him with the truth because silence would have meant erasing myself from my own story. I didn't ruin a wedding. I exposed a deception. And for anyone who's ever doubted their voice, this was for you. Within hours, the post hit 500,000 likes. Messages poured in. Women. Men. Strangers. Survivors. People from all over the country writing things like, "You gave me courage to confront my ex. Thank you for standing up. You made me feel less alone." But not everyone was on my side. Some called me vindictive, dramatic, bitter. There were online threads debating whether I'd done it for attention. One user posted, "She probably knew the whole time. Just wanted to humiliate him." But for every voice like that, there were 10 more with warmth, empathy, solidarity. It didn't balance the scales completely, but it helped. By midweek, the story had reached national morning shows. I received 2 interview requests from major networks. I declined them both. I wasn't ready to sit under studio lights and relive everything for ratings. Meanwhile, the Whitmore family was crumbling in public. Noah disappeared from social media completely. Lorraine tried to post a cryptic quote about forgiveness and growth on her foundation's page, but the comments section turned savage. Within 24 hours, the foundation paused all public operations. Then came the fallout I never anticipated. Senator Barringer released an official statement withdrawing all political and financial ties with Whitmore Holdings. In light of recent revelations and a clear breach of trust, we will no longer be moving forward with the Whitmore-Barringer Development Initiative. That alone cost the Whitmores over $80 million in projected contracts. Charles's name was removed from 2 advisory boards by the end of the week. And then, a small investigative newspaper dropped a bombshell, a deep-dive article into questionable real estate acquisitions by Whitmore Holdings over the past 5 years, including possible ties to rezoning bribery. The house of cards was collapsing. All because of 1 USB and 4 years of truth. Ben called the next day. "You've done more than you realize," he said. "This wedding thing was the fuse. The explosion has only started." I didn't want to be responsible for anyone's downfall. But I wasn't going to apologize for no longer carrying their secrets. And then Noah called. I let it go to voicemail. But the sound of his voice, strained, breathless, almost panicked, made my stomach twist. "Jane, I didn't want it to go this way. Please call me back. We need to talk. You were everything to me. I swear it." I didn't call back. I didn't owe him anything. But I saved the message. Not as proof of guilt, but as a reminder. A scar you don't cover up, because it keeps you from walking straight into the same pain again. 3 days later, a letter arrived at my door. No return address. Inside was a check for $250,000. Made out to me. From the Whitmore Family Trust. No note. Just a number. I sat there staring at it for a long time. The silence was deafening. Then I got up, pulled a pair of scissors from the kitchen drawer, and cut the check into 100 tiny pieces. I dropped them into an envelope and scribbled one sentence on a sticky note. Some things can't be bought back. I mailed it back to their estate in Portland. No one ever responded. And I finally felt peace. I left Portland a month later. There was nothing left for me there. Not the streets where Noah and I once strolled hand in hand. Not the cafes where I sketched design ideas on napkins while he pretended to read. Every corner held echoes, and I needed silence. I moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico. Not forever. Just far enough. Santa Fe had always been a dream of mine. Wide skies, adobe houses in warm desert tones, art galleries instead of skyscrapers, and a pace that didn't require you to prove your worth with every breath. I rented a modest 2-bedroom house with curved walls and bougainvillea spilling from clay pots on the porch. The kind of place that felt like it belonged to a quieter version of me. And that's what I became. quieter, calmer, whole. I found a job at a local design studio that specialized in installations for regional museums. It wasn't high-paying. It wasn't flashy. But it mattered. My ideas mattered. I worked on a children's exhibit for the Museum of International Folk Art and cried the day it opened, watching kids marvel at cardboard cities and kaleidoscope mirrors I had built with my own hands. I started painting again. Just small canvases at first, sunsets, rooftops, abstract emotions I couldn't name. I went jogging. I tried new recipes. I filled my walls with color and my nights with books I had never made time to finish before. Avery visited often. She flew in once a month like clockwork. She never let me disappear too far. We'd eat enchiladas, walk canyon trails, talk for hours, or not talk at all. Sometimes silence was enough. Naomi sent postcards, memes, and care packages stuffed with design stickers, art pens, and sarcastic notes like, "Put this on your next gallery piece and make some rich hippie cry." Caleb visited once, claiming he had a tech client nearby, but I think he just wanted to make sure I had Wi-Fi and locks that worked. He gave me a USB drive, blank except for one folder titled "Just in Case." I never opened it. One afternoon, 8 months after the wedding crash, I sat on my porch sipping mint tea, feeling the warmth of the late August sun on my face. My phone buzzed. It was Naomi. "Naomi, guess what? Noah's engaged, again." I blinked. Stared at the screen. The words didn't sting. They didn't twist something in my chest. They just sat there. "Jane, who's the bride this time?" "Naomi, daughter of a bank CEO in Dallas. Met her at some investment conference. They're moving fast." I stared at that text. Not because it hurt. But because it didn't. "Jane, hope they met at the right time." She replied with a single heart emoji. That was all. And honestly, it was enough. A few weeks later, I received an email from a local community arts center. They were organizing a panel called "Rebuilding Through Art, Stories of Renewal." A friend had referred my name. They asked if I would consider speaking. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't a motivational speaker. I wasn't a survivor looking to be turned into someone's morning inspiration. I didn't want to tell my story just to be reminded of Noah. But then I remembered what Avery once said when I doubted myself. "You're not telling it so they remember him. You're telling it to remind yourself that you rewrote what came next." So I agreed. The event was held in a modest auditorium. Rows of folding chairs. No stage lights. Just people. People who'd been hurt, who'd started over, who needed to believe that broken didn't mean finished. When it was my turn, I walked to the front of the room and looked out at the unfamiliar faces. And I spoke. I didn't start with Noah. I didn't start with betrayal. I started with a question. What do you do when you realize 4 years of your life were built by someone who never planned to stay? I talked about the quiet unraveling. The days that felt like fog. The night I stepped into a wedding dressed as a caterer with a USB drive in my apron. I told them how it felt to stand in front of hundreds of strangers and say, "I have a reason." I didn't cry. I didn't dramatize. I just told the truth. How I left. How I painted. How I learned to be alone without being lonely. How I mailed a shredded check back to the people who thought my pain had a price tag. When I finished, no one clapped right away. There was just a moment of silence. A kind of reverent pause, like everyone had just exhaled together. And then the applause came. Soft at first. Then rising. Not for drama. Not for scandal. For truth. Afterward, a woman approached me. Late 50s. Silver braid. She took my hand in both of hers and said, "I wish I had spoken when I had the chance. You reminded me it's not too late." That's when I understood. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a quiet Monday morning when the email came in. The sun was barely up over the hills outside my window, and I was sipping coffee in a worn sweatshirt, answering design feedback on a museum project when I saw it. The subject line was simple. Just one word. Rebecca. I froze. My finger hovered over the trackpad. I hadn't spoken to her since the wedding. Hadn't even seen her face, apart from the viral video stills and a distant shot in a gossip blog 3 weeks after everything went down. I clicked. Jane. I know this is unexpected, and I won't take up much of your time. I just wanted to say thank you. Not for what happened that day, but for giving me the truth I didn't have the courage to see. I've been living in Dallas, working on my father's literacy campaign. It's the first time in years I've done something that actually feels like mine. The rest is still complicated. If you're ever open to it, I'd like to meet. Not for closure. Just human clarity. No cameras. No scripts. There's a small coffee shop in Loghurst Park. Saturday morning at 10. If you come, I'll be there. If not, I'll understand. Warmly. Rebecca. I read it 3 times. And for some reason, the emotion that rose wasn't anger or hesitation. It was curiosity. I thought about the day of the wedding, how stunned she'd looked, not just by Noah's betrayal but by the quiet dignity with which it all collapsed. I remembered the way she'd removed the ring and said, "This wedding is over." There was no screaming. No chaos. Just a woman stepping out of a lie. And now, she wanted to sit across from me, as equals. I stared at the email for another hour before typing a reply. Saturday. 10. I'll be there. The coffee shop was small, tucked between a bookstore and a flower stall, the kind of place where you could sit quietly for hours without anyone bothering you. I arrived 5 minutes early, more out of nerves than punctuality. Rebecca walked in right on time. She wore a soft gray trench coat, her hair pinned up, minimal makeup. She looked elegant, yes, but different too. More grounded. Less like a senator's daughter. More like someone who'd seen the inside of a hurricane and survived it. She sat across from me without hesitation. "Thank you for coming," she said first. I nodded. I didn't come to hear an apology. "Good," she said, a faint smile tugging at her mouth. "Because I'm not offering one. Not on his behalf. And certainly not on mine." We sipped in silence for a moment. Then she continued. "I just wanted to say, you didn't ruin anything. You revealed something that had already been broken. I knew something was wrong. 4 months. But when you love someone who lies well, you start to think the problem is you." I looked at her and felt no resentment. Just recognition. "We were both lied to," I said. Just at different points on the timeline. Rebecca stirred her coffee slowly. "He proposed with his mother's ring. Told me he'd been saving it for someone he trusted. I look back now, and I see all the signs. But I wanted it to be true so badly." "I know the feeling," I said. She looked at me, eyes soft. "I don't know if I ever said it that day, but thank you. For standing up. I wasn't brave enough to say no until you forced the truth into the light." I exhaled slowly. We weren't friends. Maybe never would be. But we were survivors of the same man's deception, and something about sitting there, side by side, unguarded, made me feel like the final knot in my chest had finally come undone. We didn't hug when we parted. There were no Instagram selfies or exchanged numbers. Just a nod. 2 women who had walked through fire and emerged with dignity intact. Later that week, I received a new package. Hand-delivered. No signature. Inside was a leather-bound book. The cover was soft and matte, etched with the title. The Space Between Versions. It was blank inside. Except for the first page. For Jane. You taught me that silence is not strength. That sometimes, the most powerful thing a woman can do is walk straight into a lie and say, no more. This is your space now. To rewrite. To rebuild. To live. From someone who finally understands. R. I closed the book gently. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I reached for my pen. And I began to write. Not about Noah. Not about betrayal. But about starting over. The first line I wrote in that leather-bound journal was simple. This time, the story is mine. It's been nearly a year since that cold December morning at Longridge Estate. Since I stood in front of 300 guests, some powerful, some pitiful, and told the truth no one wanted to hear. Since I shattered the lie that had nearly swallowed me whole. And every single day since then, I've reclaimed something I thought I'd lost. Not my dignity. Not my peace. Not even my faith in people. What I reclaimed was me. Not the version of me that curated every corner of her life to be worthy of someone else's love. Not the version who waited 4 years for a man to choose her. But the version who stood, even when her knees were shaking, and said, I deserve better. The truth is, healing didn't come all at once. It wasn't some cinematic montage of better mornings and spontaneous laughter. It was quiet. Uneven. Some nights I still woke up, startled by memories that didn't match reality. Some mornings I still caught myself wondering if it had all really happened. But most days? I didn't think of Noah at all. His name no longer sparked bitterness or pain. Just silence. The way an old bruise fades until you forget where it came from. I kept working at the design studio in Santa Fe. I helped build an installation about resilience and identity that was featured in Southwest Living. The curator said it made visitors cry. I didn't tell them the sculpture was based on the feeling of holding your breath for 4 years and finally exhaling. I met people. Good people. People who didn't ask about the wedding story unless I offered it. And when I did, it was no longer about the shock. It was about the strength that bloomed afterward. I started teaching workshops at the community center. Teens, mostly, kids who had been through things they didn't know how to say out loud. We painted. We sculpted. We laughed. Sometimes we cried. They didn't know I had once been that girl from the video. They only knew that I listened. That I showed up. That I believed them when they said, I don't think I'm enough. One night, after a workshop, a girl named Alina, 16, eyes like wildfire, stayed behind. She asked, Miss Jane, how do you know when it's okay to stop hurting? I looked at her and answered honestly. You don't. Not all at once. But there will come a day when the pain doesn't run the show. It just rides in the back seat. And you get to choose where you're going. She nodded slowly, then hugged me. That moment meant more than any headline ever could. 8 months after that, I was invited to speak at a regional TEDx event. I nearly declined. I didn't want to become someone else's viral story again. But Avery convinced me. You're not telling it for them, she reminded me. You're telling it through you. For anyone who's still stuck behind the lie. So I stood on that stage in front of a red, under lights that didn't feel nearly as heavy as they once did. And I spoke. I told them how I fell for a man who promised forever, then prepared a wedding with someone else behind my back. I told them how I found out. How I walked into his ceremony and said the truth out loud. How I walked away. I told them about the silence that followed. About the peace I built from scraps. About painting on weekends and laughing without checking someone else's face first. And then I said the most important thing I've ever said on a stage. You do not owe your silence to people who built their success on your suffering. You do not owe your grace to people who mistook your love for convenience. And you do not owe your loyalty to anyone who saw you as a placeholder instead of a person. I ended with this. We all deserve the dignity of a story we choose. Even if that story starts with pain, betrayal, and walking out the back door of a wedding in a uniform not meant for us. What matters is what happens after. When I finished, the applause didn't come immediately. There was that pause again. The same breathless hush that came after I spoke up at the altar. But this time, it wasn't disbelief. It was respect. A few months later, the video of that talk started circulating. Quietly. Nothing viral. Nothing chaotic. Just steadily. People found it. Shared it. Quoted it. And I started getting messages. From women in Atlanta. From men in Norway. From teachers in South Africa. From teens in Ohio. All saying the same thing in different words: thank you for showing me that starting over doesn't mean starting from nothing. Because that's the truth. We're not what was done to us. We're what we do next. And as for Noah? I heard he tried launching a new startup. It never took off. His engagement to the Dallas heiress ended quietly. His name no longer shows up in major real estate deals. His parents disappeared from society pages. Last I heard, he was living in Seattle, trying to start over himself. I wish him peace. Not because he deserves it. But because I do. Peace means never having to hold someone else's guilt in your body. Peace means letting go without needing permission. Peace means living. Fully. Fiercely. And freely. And that's what I'm doing now. We all carry stories that nearly broke us. But what if the most powerful thing you can do isn't to erase them, but to tell them? To take control of the narrative. To rewrite the ending. Because your story doesn't belong to those who hurt you. It belongs to you. Thank you for watching Revenge Echoes, where stories speak louder than revenge. If this story moved you, please share it, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful narratives about truth, betrayal, and rising from the ashes.